Slow and Steady, the podcast where you get to follow along as we build products in public. Each week, we'll give you an honest peek into our lives as we share our struggles, our wins, and everything in between. I'm Benedicte, and I'm feeling antsy.
And I'm Benedikt. Today is July 26th. This is episode number 147, and I'm feeling a little bit tired. But that doesn't matter because we have a great guest today. With us today is Nathan Powell. He's a UI/UX designer with a long history of working with SaaS businesses and even launched his own and sold his own. He's currently working on a UI/UX course for developers, as well as a new software product called FeatureFlex. And welcome to the show, Nathan. How are you feeling today?
Hey guys, I'm feeling anxious, nervous, and hot.
That's a lot of feelings at once.
For reasons we can get into in a bit, but yes, primarily hot, very hot.
So you're in the heat wave then?
Yeah, I'm just outside Madrid in Spain, and it has been horrendous here for like about it feels like the last year, but I think it's been probably the last 2 weeks. It is just, yeah, it's horrendous. It's horrendous. I can feel the sweat dripping down my back.
At least you can blame the heat. It's not your nervousness making that happen.
No. It's primarily the heat. It's primarily the heat.
Oh, that's good.
Anything else been happening?
So, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say if anything else contributed to the to your feelings other than the heat wave.
Well, the nerves primarily because this is the first podcast interview I've done in probably, let me think, at least 3 years, possibly longer. So yeah, I'm a little nervous about coming on. I'm actually better than I thought I was going to be, but there are definitely some nerves there. Yeah, coming back to this after such a long break is it's a little nerve-wracking. Even if you are really, great to get on with and easygoing, and there's always a bit of nerves.
Sure, absolutely. So maybe let's backtrack a little bit. So you mentioned that you've been gone for a while, and it was because you sold your was it your first product? I'm not entirely sure. Your previous project you sold to your co-founder, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's my first SaaS, not my first product, but my first SaaS, and the first product that had any real success, shall we say. So I started messing around with Nusi.com in 2013, which is a business proposal SaaS for what were then for creative agencies. And it was kind of scratching my own itch at the time, being a designer and freelance designer. I've been freelance for like 15 years out of my 17-year career. So, that whole thing about trying to win new business. Back in 2013, there weren't that many options. Obviously, Ruben's bid sketch was probably still king back then, even though he'd been around for a long time. But there weren't many options. So I decided, I want to try and build something, I want to try and get into the software. And also this is a pain in my ass. I can't find anything that's really good for me. So, so I started putting together Nusi, and then I quickly realized that me not being a technical kind of guy really needed to bring a technical co-founder on board. Otherwise it was going to end up costing me a fortune. And fortunately I found Michael, who, Benedict. And we kind of, from 2014 to 2019, we built and grew this SaaS. It became our sole income, our sole business, our sole passion. And then in 2019, I decided I'd had enough. I'd had enough of Nusi. It started out, I think, as most products do for most people, as just a complete passion, working weekends. And when Monday came rolling around, it was depressing because oh no, I have to get back to real work and all that kind of thing. But I think over time, obviously, passions usually tend to dip. And I was thinking about other things. You change over a period of time, and I thought, okay, maybe it's time for me to get out. And Michael, fortunately, wanted to take my half of the business and take it over. So it was kind of, this is a good way to go. This is a good way to get out. And Michael and I still speak every single day. So it was completely amicable. And I saw that in 2019, and I did something quite foolish. I almost thought like I was just leaving that world behind. And have done this in many other areas of my life, but I thought I'm just going to make a clean break of it, and I'm going to disappear from the internet. And I just deleted everything. I deleted my social media accounts. I deleted, I think, LinkedIn. I deleted. The only thing I kept was Gmail, my Gmail account. And I thought I'm going to go and live like a hermit for a couple of years and enjoy the mountains. I'm into mountain biking. I'm going to go and ride and all this stuff. And of course, while that sounded idyllic and probably stupid to the listeners now, when that moment comes when you have to come back, it makes everything really hard. Really hard.
So what happened that you decided to come back? Like just spending your days mountain biking sounds kind of great.
Yeah, and I would carry on like that until the end of time if it hadn't come to the realization that I need to start building another business again. Money doesn't last forever. And before this money runs out, I need to have another business in place. And yeah, I mean, that was basically why I came back. I was still doing a bit of consulting every now and again, as you do. But I knew that for something to be in place before I give myself a deadline of sort of early mid next year, 2023. And we all know how long SaaS take to get to anywhere near, financial viability. Then yeah, it needs to be kicking off. And I'd actually come back and I tried a few different things. I tried a couple of different design services in different spaces, and I couldn't get any of them off the ground. And I kind of came to this realization that the services business per se, in air quotes and all that stuff, isn't really. I don't think it's definitely not where I wasn't happiest, and it wasn't where I shone either. So I thought, right, I got to get back to software. And that's kind of really how I came back. And I need to have some kind of social presence because you can't build in a bubble, and those who do usually have a very rude awakening. But going back and starting again from scratch is terrible because you're coming back as a complete newbie. Nobody knows you. And even if you still maintain those connections, and to be honest, I cut off a lot of, I really did go dark for a few years. So going back and trying to build that and reaching out to all connections and connecting up and, back in 2013 when content was king, and that it probably still is to a large extent, so many things have changed as well now with regards to how you might want to build a business. I mean, TikTok and all of that. I mean, that didn't even exist when I was building my business, and it's changed a lot. I don't want to sound like an old man, but
we're all old.
Things change, they move on. Yeah.
But do you think if you'd gotten that kind of life-changing amount of money where you don't have to work another day, do you think you'd still be mountain biking?
I think no. I think it would have gotten me. It would have gotten to me in the end as well, because there's very little security in anything, and especially with what they say is about to happen now, on a global level. If you do have any savings, inflation, and if it's not invested and blah blah blah. But I think there's also that need as well to come back to having something that you do feel passionate again about. So it would have come sooner or later, but also having that final sort of deadline of something needs to happen by here is it's enough of a kick up the arse basically to get me going again. But yeah, if I had unending money, limitless money, then I would probably be back at some point, but I would probably also be more relaxed about it as well and have a team developing out the ideas and researching and marketing and paying for ads and customer interviews and, all these great things that people with money can do, as opposed to doing everything myself.
So you mentioned you tried a couple of things, services and such, since deciding to come back and do something new. Do you have an idea why they didn't work out, other than that you figured that you don't enjoy the services businesses that much?
I think in part it was because I was moving in areas that I don't consider to be my strong point. So I'm a UX designer. I did do UI years ago, but I'm primarily UX, and that's what I've been focusing on the last few years. And the service areas that I was looking at were basically in design, And as it was something that I was trying to get started off myself, I just immediately realized that I wasn't happy doing it. If you get me in a wireframe and set me up with sort of information architecture and planning out function and set, like, the time just disappears for me, and I'm happy and I'm comfortable and I know I can do good work. But when you put me back into a graphical element or visual element now of something, I immediately think, this isn't where I should be, really. This isn't where I'm comfortable. And I don't, I'm not happy there. And that's where I was trying to build a business, essentially, with the idea of sort of creating a mini agency and getting other designers on board at some point. But, again, kicking the business off myself, having to do everything. And it just wasn't, I think, so basically my heart wasn't really in it because I wasn't really happy doing what I was doing. And then the other part, of course, as always, was marketing, speaking to the right people and getting the right people involved. And I think I do suck at marketing. There's no two ways about it. I am talking to a lot of people now, as I'm developing out my new SaaS idea, but I think it's different talking to people than selling to people or trying to sell to people or trying to get people interested in your product or to pay you money every month, either whether that's for SaaS or for a recurring design service, which was something that I was trying to do. And there was just something about the design element of it that wasn't gelling for me, and I wasn't able to make it work. I mean, there are people who are, and the people who have, and people who are making lots of money out of it. But that wasn't me. I wasn't one of them. And so I decided to come back to, like I said, to what I know and where I feel strongest, and that's back to UX, and whether that means the UX course for indie builders and developers, or developing my own product again, which is, that's always fun, right? Regardless of where it goes, whether it pans out, whether I become a millionaire, that's always fun, at least in the beginning.
True.
So you're saying you're focusing on two things now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've because when I first started, I said come back as if I came back from the dead or something. I spoke to Laura Dunn. I'm sure a lot of your listeners know Laura, who does UI courses, design courses for developers. And I was talking to her about it, and me obviously focusing on UX. And she said, well, why don't you do what I've done, but focus it on UX? There are so many, and as well through personal experience, so much of the work I do in consulting is trying to help out with UX debt or technical debt, because many of the products I work on were created by the development team. There was very little to no sort of design input, should we say. When I say design in this instance, I'm talking about UX, so there are so many SaaS out there, early SaaS, and even SaaS that are doing millions that were built out by and developed purely by the development team, maybe with a product manager, and that was it. So I thought it would be a good place to try and help, try and get some UX fundamentals across, but taking it into real world examples. So it's not all theory and everything. It's like, let's go from the beginning, from when somebody might sign up to your SaaS, all the way through the onboarding, through to getting through to those initial features, and sort of layout and consistency, which is a huge thing as well with typically, I know you're both developers, so forgive me. Typically with developer-driven products, there's huge amounts of inconsistency through pages and through interactions and all these kinds of things. So just trying to bring it into real-world context. So I'm doing that, but off the back of that as well, I'm turning that into a book. So I started writing the book a couple of weeks ago, a month ago maybe, and it's already running away from me. I think it's going to be a lot bigger than I thought it was going to be. At the moment, I think it's up to about 30 chapters or something. But I think all going to be very manageable. It's going to be sort of short chapters with, like I said, with practical help and examples. And then that and the product as well, Feature Flux, which I started investigating for this. So as UX designer, I work with a lot of product teams, primarily product managers. And one of the big problems we always find, or have always found, is that, so if I'm a UX designer, I might go away and create some wireframes, come back to the product team. Product manager might take those wireframes then and put them into a presentation with his notes, and then either show that to stakeholders, whether it was external or internal. And then based on that feedback, that will go back to the UX designer, updates, and it goes round and round, and it can get very messy. I know there are two different ways of working on this. A lot of smaller SaaS teams just work in Figma. They share their Figma file with the rest of the team. They give their feedback, and then they just go around, in a sort of circle doing that in that cycle. But then there are the other side of this, the typically development agencies and larger SaaS, or maybe your enterprise. They are doing a lot of external sharing presentations of product updates and things, and it can get very confusing as to where the product is, which is the latest version I'm working on. Is this the last screen? Have you modified this since I left the feedback? So I'm working on something to try and help out with that. It's quite difficult because, believe it or not, it's not a defined market. So you have your Figmas, you have your Miros, you have your Envisions, but they're very focused on certain areas. So Figma, I think, is typically an internal tool. Miro is like the 10,000-foot view. We're going to go in this direction kind of thing. And then you've got Envision and Figma as well for prototyping. So there's kind of like this small gap, which is kind of scary because it's moving into a not very well-defined market makes it really hard. Like, you can speak to people and you can feel the pain, and there is pain. And then so many product managers have told me, it's like we just get lost all the time. But having to put all of that into copy, into marketing language that can be understood, is proven to be a real challenge, because so many people are just saying to me, well, why don't you just use Figma? Or why don't you just use, Jiro or whatever? So there is a problem. I'm just trying at the moment to put that into something that makes sense. And I already have one customer lined up, which is great, but one customer is not a business. So
one customer does not a business make.
Exactly. So I just have to keep talking to people and trying to evolve this problem that exists into something that people can understand.
But so is this a Git for UX then?
Possibly, yeah. Kind of. It's it's essentially to take the idea from zero. So say the product manager comes in and says, "Hey guys, this is going to be a new feature we need to develop." He can actually just, sketch it out. We're talking napkin, sketch, or whatever. The rest of the team can come around, give their feedback on that, and then take it from there. So you can take it from the wireframes to the final designs. The idea is that it will actually integrate with tools like Figma and Adobe XD. So your designs, because I don't pretend to change anyone's work habits. That's always a terrible idea. If a UX designer is going to work in Figma, he's going to work in Figma. And if he's going to work in Balsamiq, he's going to work in Balsamiq. So the idea is that everyone can continue to work in the tools they're working in, but there will be this one central place where every single screen will have the feedback it needs from each member of the team. And then each update that's made to that screen, whether that's a web app or a mobile app or whatever, will be, have its designated place, so that you can come in and say, hey, this was just updated. This is the most recent version of the design. So therefore, if the developers come in, they know this has been sanctioned, or they know this is, had the feedback put in place. And those kinds of things don't work as a lot of people would want them to within things like Figma and Envision, because they are more general design apps. They are sort of whiteboarding apps, shall we say, where there's limitless screen space. Typically, we design software on a screen-by-screen basis, and we explain software internally on a screen-by-screen basis. When you do this, this will happen. When you do this, this will happen. And so this software is going to be quite opinionated. It's going to work on a screen-by-screen basis. It's only going to show you one screen at a time, and it's going to be able to go sort of work you through the workflows, one screen at a time, feedback per screen, updates per screen, and then, of course, things like versioning and sort of states and draft and development and all that kind of stuff. So, it's kind of scary because it's so close to what exists, but at the same time, it doesn't exist. So it could be a complete disaster. I really hope not.
Yeah, that would be a waste of time.
Yes.
I guess all ideas can be a complete disaster. I mean, that's what makes this a little bit fun too, because you have that idea, and if you were sure it wouldn't fail, like, a lot of the excitement of it would be gone, though.
Yeah, and I think as well that obviously the market is big enough in so many aspects and in so many spaces. There are always going to be teams. I've spoken to so many product managers. I've done so many polls and everything, and there's pretty much an even split between the teams that use the Figma and Miro route and those that hack the system together, with sort of wireframes and PDFs and PowerPoint and Google Slides and all that. I'm going after the second group, the ones that hack it all together. I'm not necessarily interested. I don't want to convert the Figma users. They've got their established system. So I think there's definitely a space. It just depends whether I can convert that idea into something that people can understand, which is the problem I think most of us face when we're trying to build out a product. Is like, are people going to get it? Because if they don't get it, it doesn't matter how good the product is. If you can't explain it to someone, then it's going to struggle anyway until you can find that fit of language. People can stumble across it and try it out and say, "Oh, damn, I didn't realize," but that's not generally the case, is it? And we need to be able to convince people at least via the landing page, that this is something that could possibly be interesting to them. And that's the biggest struggle I have right now.
But do designers still send around files where it's like, you add on to the file name where it's like final 3.review dash my comments, Benedicte?
I suppose, yes, they still do, but that's not even the biggest problem.
Okay.
So I spoke to a developer just last week who was working for a startup last year, and it was actually me trying to sort of explain the product to him, and it took me a long time until he got it. And then all of a sudden he said, "Oh, you mean?" And then he went on to explain about he'd worked for the startup last year. He said, "I was working with the UI developer who was working in Figma, in Adobe XD. Then he would export those images and he would share them on Discord. And then everyone in the team would come into Discord and leave feedback, give their feedback on those images. Then he would go back into XD, and obviously the cycle would repeat." There are so many people working like that, and while it might sound like an absurd way to work, I think it's, from the research I've done, at least, obviously smaller numbers, I think it works out about a pretty even split between the companies that are hacking it together, as in that example, and those that are working exclusively within one system. So I think that's a large number of people who are updating the file names, as in final V2 Z, really is the final, and those that are just updating one file. Those are just updating one file, and I think the big problem there is that not the problem. The reason this is happening is because the majority of product managers don't come from a design background anyway. One of the polls I did came back. I think I polled 120 product managers, and over 70% of them did not come from a design background. So they would come from a technical or other area. So what they're doing is they're taking that information and they're literally cutting everything up, putting it into a PowerPoint or into a Google Slides presentation, adding their feedback there, and then presenting that to whoever needs to see it. So it's to a certain degree, the rest of the product team can't do anything until the product manager changes the way he or she wants to work. And, again, changing how people work is tricky, but to a certain extent, I need to be able to do that.
So maybe taking a little bit of a step back, you mentioned you're writing or building a course for indie developers, and I feel like that's perfect description of our audience. So maybe let's talk a little bit about that part. What do you think what are the biggest mistakes people make when building their apps UX wise? Like, is there anything, like, you mentioned the course has 30, or the book has 30 chapters. What are like
that'll come down.
Most important ones?
Yeah, no, that'll come down, and it's going to be. I want to keep it short and snappy because, like I said, I want each chapter to apply to a particular example. But there are definitely areas that you see repeated over and over. Through the month of May, I did a UX review pretty much every day on Twitter and released those. And you end up seeing commonalities between. They were all early stage SaaS. The majority of them were early stage SaaS, and I think again that's typical. We could probably say that's typical that most of those teams, they're indie teams, whether that's indie developer, solo, or with a designer or something. And It basically starts right at the beginning, the sign up. We have, we're told that we need data. We're told that we need to segment. We're told that we need to know where people are coming from so we can write our copy better. But the thing is that oftentimes that translates into a sign-up form that's like 3/4 of the length of the page. So we want the first name, last name, business name. Maybe we insist on it being a work email rather than a Gmail. There are so many little things that tend to get added to that form. And typically when we're testing out any new piece of software, we're trialing a new piece of software, we just want to get in as quickly as possible. And the more friction we create on that is just, the less likely I'm going to be to go through with it. Like the only question you really need to ask yourself there is how much of this information do I actually need right now for them to get in to the software and try it out. If we don't need it right now, don't ask for it now, ask for it later. If you need the business name later because it's going to help with their, it's going to be part of the service, it's going to be integrated into templates or something like that, then ask for it later. You really don't need as much information as you think you might do to be able to log in to trial account. And you see that I see it over and over and over again. Just pare it down. Don't worry. You can get the important stuff afterwards. You don't need the last name. You don't. Phone number is another big one as well. I know it depends really whether you intend on doing any kind of salesy thing, but most people, if they see a phone number on a sign-up form, automatically bail because you don't want to be speaking to anyone, especially when you're just trying out a new piece of software. It's like, don't ring me. Like, really, don't ring me. I'm not going to answer the phone.
Especially if you're a developer.
It's like or even a UX designer. We're all just as much as an introvert as the next. Don't call me. Don't. So unless there's a valid business reason, you need to ask for that phone number, and I would argue there isn't on the sign-up form anyway. Don't ask for it. So that's right from the get-go is an area where we tend to go overboard. And again, I think that's because what we read, we need all this data, we need to know these things, we need to learn, we need to segment. And then the other thing after that is a lot of SaaS, smaller SaaS and larger SaaS, after the sign up, they choose to go one of two ways. There's either take you straight into the SaaS and then have some kind of onboarding, or jump straight into an onboarding form workflow before you even are allowed to see the SaaS, if that makes sense. So you might be asked to fill out a couple of pages. Again, I think depending on your goals, depending on your market, depending on how much money is behind all of this, your goals are going to be different. But I would suggest that having a sign-up form, then throwing in a few pages of, and this typically are a few pages of further requests to fill out, for indie developers, for indie builders, is probably not a good way to go. Again, we want people to get in as quickly as possible. We are so, our attention span is so short when it comes to trying out any new software, any new product. We just want to get in, we want to see if it works, and then we're going to either hang around or we're just going to disappear. So again, adding up another gate is not a good idea. I think during the month of May, I think I reviewed probably about 20 SaaS. And again, like I said, most of them were early stage SaaS, most of them kind of indie, and most of them didn't have any kind of onboarding at all. You were literally dropped into the SaaS, and that was it. Goodbye. It doesn't matter how simple you think your SaaS is. You always live in a space that doesn't exist for anyone else. Like, the end result and the end goal for your SaaS. You know what it's supposed to do. You know how you're supposed to get there. And so it's so difficult for you as a builder, as a founder, to understand that anybody else who isn't you doesn't live in that same space, doesn't live with that same knowledge, doesn't live with, to get from A to B, I need to do this. So just dropping somebody into the product with nothing, with no help whatsoever. And on many, many occasions, there wasn't even a help. There wasn't even a chat widget. There was just like, good luck, good luck. And if you need to contact me, tough. So, the bare minimum is some way of being able to get in touch with a chat widget or with a help docs. And I know that when you're first building software, the last thing you're thinking about is help docs, but something, even if it's only an email, even if your onboarding, in air quotes, is literally just an image overlay pointing to, if you genuinely do have software that's easy to use, that literally just needs you to click a button up here to create your whatever it is, even just an image overlay, with the stereotypical arrow pointing up saying, hey, this is where you get started, is better than just dropping people right into your software and saying goodbye. And that happens so often. I know that onboarding is always an afterthought. I'm sure that Benedict as well has huge amounts of experience in this now, that the whole customer onboarding is fundamental to the success of any SaaS, any software. So just dumping them in there is a terrible idea and happens more often than you would think. And another one as well, another simple one is, and I think this is literally just due to a lack of knowledge and just trying to get things done regardless, is layout and consistency. As an indie builder or an indie developer, we might want a function on one page to do this and a function on another page to do this. And all we care about is that function works and exists and allows the user to do X. And we don't really care how that ties up with the rest of the site, the rest of the app. As long as it works, that's good enough. But unfortunately, it's not, because, as I said, if we come into a piece of software, there's no onboarding or no indications to how it works. So already I have to learn how the system works. So if I learn, say, the basic navigational elements on this page, or how I need to interact with something on this page, and then I need to go to a different page, and all of a sudden you change everything on me, then I have to learn yet again how this works and how this interaction works. And then if I go to another page or another function, and that happens as well, more than it should. I mean, really, more than it should. And so it's basically just consistency. It's basically just a lack of working to a system. And I know that developers like to build everything from scratch, but sometimes a template can do so much for you, and even if it's just a design template, having that consistent layout and functionality, or sorry, not functionality, but having that consistent navigation and interaction between elements, it can be huge. So you're not going to build everything from scratch, but you're going to make it easier for your user. And what would you rather, build everything from scratch and be able to give yourself a pat on the back, or have something that people, can use and don't have to relearn every time they click on something. Moving elements around as well, with having an element here on one page and then clicking through to another, and the element has moved because I've needed to add another element here. Those things are just, you see all the time, and they're just big no-nos. So I think the sign up, the onboarding, dropping people in with no help whatsoever, and consistency are the three sort of overarching one sort of problem areas that you see in so many SaaS.
I think in that latest one, I guess Twitter changed their following color on their button, because all of their action buttons, the main action was solid color, and then the other ones were outlined. But for the following, it was the other way around. If you choose to decide that to follow is the main action. So they changed that so that now it's black when you're not following, and then outlined when you are following. And I remember there was like a big outcry on Twitter because the people were so confused if you've been using it for a while. But I think it took about 24 hours and people were down with it, because it actually, I think, enforced their consistency. But all of us had learned, the inconsistent way. But then it took, I remember there being like loads of tweets, but there haven't been any complaints after the 24 first hours. So I'm guessing they actually, changed to the better, or more to the more consistent way of doing it. But
yeah, I mean, inconsistency just means you have to learn and relearn. So,
yeah.
But again, that's interesting as well, though, because any change you make to if you have any sort of significant number of customers, any change you make to UX is always going to result in people speaking out, regardless of whether it's a better or for worse. Like the Twitter example is great. Everyone was like, "No, you can't. Twitter's sacred." but then 24 hours later, everyone shuts up and it's like, oh, okay, so regardless of whether it's for the better or the worse, changes within software are always going to be, they're always going to be people who are upset because maybe it took them so long to learn how to use the initial version. They're making it simpler now. It's like, no, damn, no, all time invested. But,
I'm a power user now. Don't make it easy for everyone else. Another example
completely.
I remember was somebody said, I think it was Best Buy or one of these like e-commerce, they spent 6 months changing the color of their yellow because they tried to do it and people got so annoyed. So they ended up just changing the shade over a really long period of time and nobody complained because the power...
Yellow is supposed to be the color that represents cheap, isn't it? So it's like, which is bizarre though, because you want it to be associated with a cheap brand. Don't change it. This is where we buy things. Best Buy, keep it yellow, keep it cheap. I guess there's a certain philosophy behind that.
Yes, I think it was one of those. And when it was done gradually, nobody, the power users saw it every day, or the people who were there a lot that would complain, and then the other users would not complain. So for the people not seeing what is happening, we're going to be laughing because I have family showing up at my beautiful view behind me. But they should go away. Go away, people. That's what
I have that with my dogs as well. Yeah. Every time I want to call or a meeting, the dogs come in and want to go out and scratching the door. I'm like, oh, sorry, 1 second.
Yeah, I lock the house so they're not getting in.
That's probably why they're behind you outside, screaming and banging at the window.
They have another house. They can go inside. They're fine. They're not gonna. There's food. There's shelter. It's all good. But yeah, back to the UX. But sign up and onboarding is so hard though, because I feel like as a developer, if you change something there, a lot of things changes, because if you don't have all the information you need, you actually have to do a lot of checks in the rest of your UX, like, oh, I don't have this information, I need to show like an empty screen that is nicer, or not collecting information in the beginning might end up kind of rippling through the whole application because you might be expecting that information later on or in other parts of the UX.
And like I said, I think it just depends how necessary that information is. Like if it's critical to providing a decent service straight from the bat, then I think it's okay. But there were a series of tests done, and these were a few years ago now. I think it was 2016, 2017, and they were saying that for every extra field you add on a form, you could see between a 6 to 10% drop off. Now, I don't know how accurate that data is anymore, but there is there is obviously something behind that. In that, obviously, the longer you make a form, the less likely someone is going to want to fill it out, and especially for the more personal details you add, as in the phone number. I'm not giving you my phone number, and if I am, it's going to be fake. Yeah. So. But I think that information that you said that is going to be vital. That's what onboarding can be for as well. If you think about, I hate to use LinkedIn as an example because I personally dislike LinkedIn quite, but the whole thing about that giving people a nudge is like, hey, you need to fill out your profile, or we're missing this information, or we need the phone number. There are so many ways you can do that in onboarding afterwards. That don't necessarily need to be done straight away. So I think, and as well with onboarding, there are so many options and so many ways to do that now. And the whole, the sort of the melting together of the walkthrough and the onboarding thing now as well. It's, again, there are so many options and so many sort of solutions for it now, right, Benedict? Getting customers to activate and to so many ways to do that. Again, a large part of that just depends on the product you're trying to sell, trying to get people hooked on. So, sorry, hooked is not the right word. Trying to get people excited about.
Cool. Do you have more questions, Benedicte?
If I could talk, like I want to talk now. I want to talk onboarding, but I guess that's. I have such a hard time with onboarding.
Onboarding that is difficult. So you can the whole sign up area and the sort of the layout and the consistency, because all of those things are built on fundamental sort of established design anyway. Like, so many of us want to innovate, we want to be groundbreakers and stuff, but I think that's for other areas. Leave that up to the the people who are trying to build electric cars and go to Mars. For software, we don't want to have to relearn how to use a piece of software every time we go into a piece of software. We pretty much want to have an established layout. We pretty much know that over on the left-hand sidebar, we're going to find primary navigation, or maybe along the top with the profile either on the top right or on the bottom left, and setting. We're used to finding those things. So it's almost a standardized system now, and I would suggest that most people would be foolish to try and stray away from that, because it just means relearning, confusing, adding complications. So all of those are the easy areas. The onboarding and the walkthrough, I think, is genuinely the difficult part of getting people in to activate, and getting people in to be interested enough, and to give enough information, and to be able to understand how well enough how to use the system, and also to be able to come back to it as well. One of the big things as well is that when I say onboarding now, I'm mixing together onboarding and walkthroughs. Many SaaS, when they do that now, they'll give you the option to cancel out, which I think most people do. But then it disappears and goes away forever. And that's it. It's gone. It's like all of a sudden, it's like, oh no, I have a question. I need help. And then it's gone forever. So it's if you're giving somebody the option to jump out of something, give them the option to jump back in as well at some point, and let them know where that's going to be. But yeah, onboarding, I think, is everything else is pretty much standardized. You can read books like what the UX coming out in several months, I imagine, or whenever it's going to be. But the onboarding and the walkthrough, I think, is where there is a lot of experimentation. Again, a lot of it is standardized, but there's a lot of experimentation with regards to what's going to work for your audience and for your product.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those.
Yeah, Go ahead.
No, you're the one who just did this, so go ahead, Benedict.
It's just nothing too important. I guess the hard part. That's the hard part about getting the onboarding right, because it's very specific to your specific product. Like, yes, there are patterns, but you still have to adapt them to whatever it is you're doing. And I also feel like it's, especially with those flows when you just sign up, where it tells you, hey, here's this button, here's that button. I mean, those, it's what a lot of people do, but they're not necessarily useful. Like, just telling people that this is the save button. Yeah, obviously it says save on it. So it requires a lot of time and effort to get this right and be actually helpful and actually useful.
Yeah.
And I guess that's why it's a lot harder, because you have to figure out what people are struggling with and providing them with proper help. And that's very unique to your product. So there's no shortcut for that, I guess.
Definitely. And I think a lot of that has to come from having that information as well, and knowing, and having a certain number of people in using the system, and knowing, where, like you said, where are they struggling? Where is that sort of moment of, oh, wow, I finally get it, going to come from? Because obviously if it's going to come from X, then you need to push your new user to X, because if that's the quickest route to understanding your software, then it has nothing to do with here is where you save, here is where you create a new profile, here is, if that doesn't help them move closer, then yeah, it's irrelevant to any new customer. So yeah, you need a certain amount of data as well. So it's kind of the chicken and egg situation. You don't want to just drop your people straight into the software, no matter how simple you think it is, but at the same time, and it's something you need to work towards as well, because you do need a certain amount of information. You do need to know what those aha or wow moments are within your software. But at the same time, you're probably not going to know that straight off the bat. So it's going to be something that changes and evolves as your software does, and your customer base does as well.
Slow and steady.
Slow and steady.
slow.
Unfortunately, it's always slow and steady. As long as you're steady, it's fine.
As long as you're steady. But on a different topic, so you've been working through all of this, these ideas, and you've been testing different things. And so how does your typical week look like?
Typical week. I'm struggling at the moment to try and fit everything in. So I'm writing the book. The ideal is that it would be out in a 2 to 3 months, probably 3 months. Off the back of that, I want to create a course as well, a full video course. That is still in the planning stages, shall we say? Then, so I'm working on the SaaS as well. That's kind of taking up a bit of time as well. So I'm working with a product team who's actually a client of mine as well. So that's great because it means I have people to fall back on and get feedback and help from and stuff. And then there's client work as well. And also I live in Spain. And I don't know if you know about summer holidays in Spain, but the kids here have 2.5 months holiday for summer. I think they do in Sweden as well, right? 2.5 months.
Yeah, we have.
According to my.
Yeah, we're actually from Norway, but holidaying in Sweden, and it's 2 it's 2 months.
So, 2 months, yeah. So 2.5 months here, and that's working around children for 2.5 months. I mean, that's basically a trimester gone out the window. So it's so a typical week is trying to mix all that together and try and be as productive as possible. So yeah, and it can be tricky, especially in this heat, because I don't feel like doing anything at all. But
you're still doing client work, you say, on top of the IDs.
Yeah, I'm still doing some client work, which is great, obviously, because self-funded, bootstrapped, self-funded, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, the money's got to come from somewhere. There are no customers. There's nothing. So yeah, I'm still consulting, still taking on UX clients, just UX now. I'm not, as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm not doing any UI or anything. So, which is great because, like I said, they're mainly SaaS that come in with a certain amount of technical and UX debt, which is where I'm happiest because it means I can just really throw the ideas and the wireframes around, and it seems to work out quite well. So yeah, I mean, the idea obviously with any indie builder, indie whatever, is to phase things out as other things ramp up. But it's so early in the stage of my new software venture. You have to be realistic. It might not even pan out. It might not go anywhere. So yeah, I won't be deleting my social media accounts this time. Twitter is back. That's the only one I'm really paying attention to, really. I'm not going to be on TikTok. I'm not going to be on Instagram. So it's Twitter or nothing, I'm afraid.
Twitter or nothing. So what's your Twitter handle for everyone so they can follow you now that you're out of
It's
back?
the worst Twitter handle in the world. It's Nathan J. Powell UX. There aren't a lot of options anymore. So when you come back so late in the game, there are not a lot of options.
Okay, I'm never going to delete.
Sorry?
Was your previous handle taken by now?
Yeah. And I can't even remember what it was, but it was a lot simpler than Nathan J. Powell UX. It was either that or Nathan J. Powell 197600, whatever. So.
I can see when I stopped being an early adopter because I have at Ray many places, RAAE, and then I was late on Instagram, so it's like Benedicte.ra, like my full name. And I guess if I go on TikTok, I'm never gonna get there will be no names left for me.
I was so when I went off the grid, I kind of did go off the grid and didn't. I started a YouTube channel for mountain biking, and because the name of the channel was half in Spanish and half in English, I got the name everywhere, like on Instagram and YouTube and all those places. So it was great. Of course, nobody was searching for it because it was a mix of two languages. But I had no problem getting the name.
Oh, now we need to add the mountain biking channel to the show notes, everyone.
Oh no, that's gone. That's gone the way of the dodo. So.
It's gone.
It's still there. It's still there, but I'm not doing anything with it.
Okay. So. But if we all want to see what you did while you were gone from Twitter, that's what happened.
Yeah. There was a couple of thousand subscribers on there as well on YouTube. So maybe I need to turn it into a UX channel. See them all unsubscribe.
It's a pivot. But I
Biggest
guess,
pivot you've ever seen.
yeah, I guess that's it. Isn't it, Benedict?
Sure.
Since you were,
Yep.
yeah. And I guess we covered, well, other places people can find you before we say goodbye.
Yeah, so Twitter, that's the only social profile you will find me on. And then my website is developyourux.com. And via that, you can find everything about the free email course and the upcoming book and everything. I'll be updating that on the website. And Feature Flux is featureflux.com. Flux as in flux capacitor from Back to the Future. So you can find out all about that on there.
Okay.
That's where I am. Cheers, guys. Thank you very much.
See you around.
It wasn't so nerve-wracking in the end.
Good to know that we can help with that.